I divorced my husband because he tightened every jar lid in our house so hard I couldn't open them. I know it sounds insane, but hear me out. My husband, Tom, had this weird habit of screwing jar lids on like he was sealing a nuclear warhead. It started when we were dating, back when he'd just come over to my place for dinner. I'd find the pickle jar or the spaghetti sauce locked tighter than a bank vault. At first, I thought it was cute, like he was showing off his strength or something. I'd laugh, hand him the jar, and he'd pop it open with this smug little grin. But over the years, it stopped being funny. It became every single jar, jam, olives, hot pepper paste, you name it. I'd strain until my hands were red, tap the lid with a spoon, run it under hot water, and still nothing. If Tom was home, he'd open it like it was no big deal. But if I was alone, I was screwed. We'd been married 5 years, and this jar thing was a constant cycle. I'd beg him to stop tightening them so much. He'd claim it was to keep the food fresh, which I called BS on. I mean, I'd rather my salsa go bad than starve because I can't get to it. Then he'd switch to saying it was just a habit, like he couldn't help it. Things would get better for a week or two after I'd lose it, screaming in the kitchen, looking like a total lunatic over a jar of mango puree. But then it'd creep back. Every lid, every time, tighter than ever. It wasn't just annoying, it felt personal, like he was doing it to mess with me. I started to dread cooking, knowing I'd have to wrestle with a jar first. I'd buy duplicates of things, 2 jars of pickles, 2 jars of marinara, just so I could eat without a meltdown. Our friends thought I was overreacting. My sister would roll her eyes and say, just ask Tom to open them. But that's not the point. I shouldn't have to beg my husband to access my own food in my own house. The breaking point came last month when Tom had to leave town for 10 days. His mom had a health scare, so he flew out to help. I was home alone, and the first night I went to make tacos. Grabbed the salsa jar stuck. I tried everything, banging it on the counter, using a rubber grip. Nothing. I was so pissed I almost drove to the store to buy a new one, but then I ran into my neighbor Mike outside. Mike's this chill guy, maybe in his 50s, always tinkering in his garage. I jokingly mentioned the jar, and he offered to help. I handed it over, and he popped it open in 2 seconds. I laughed it off, but I was embarrassed. The next day, I couldn't open the hot pepper paste jar either. I asked Mike for help again, and he offered to open all my jars. He came over, tackled the fridge and pantry, and took 2 stubborn ones, a jar of figs and some hot fudge, to his garage. When he returned, he'd opened the hot fudge but had to smash the figs. Then he said, "This wasn't an accident. Every jar's like this, and Tom doesn't use half this stuff." His words hit me hard. I sank to the kitchen floor, crying, chest tight with betrayal. That night, I realized it wasn't just about the lids. It was control. Years of feeling manipulated. By morning, I decided to divorce Tom. I called a lawyer and started packing. When he got back, I told him it was over. He denied it, begged for counseling, but I was done. That was 2 weeks ago. I initially stayed with my friend Jenna while sorting things out. Tom's still in the house, still texting me daily about how we can fix this. My parents think I've lost my mind. My sister keeps sending me links to marriage counselors. Even Jenna, who was letting me crash on her couch, gently suggested I might be having some kind of breakdown. Jar lids, she said last night over wine. You have to admit, it sounds a little extreme. I just nodded and took another sip of my drink. Maybe it does sound extreme from the outside, but I know the truth now. It was never about the jars. I didn't go back to the house for almost a week after filing the divorce papers. I needed the space. And honestly, I was scared of Tom's reaction. When I finally worked up the courage to go collect more of my things, I made sure Jenna came with me. I didn't want to be alone with Tom, not after realizing how manipulative he'd been all these years. When we pulled up to the house, I immediately noticed something was off. The front door was slightly ajar, and there were papers scattered across the front lawn. My stomach did this weird flip thing as I got out of the car. "That's not a good sign," Jenna muttered, eyeing the mess. I approached cautiously and pushed the door open. The inside of the house looked like a tornado had hit it. Drawers pulled out, furniture moved, picture frames knocked over. For a second, I panicked, thinking we'd been robbed. Then I had spotted Tom sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by folders and documents, a glass of whiskey next to him despite it being only 11 a.m. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Come to take more from me?" I froze in the doorway. In 5 years of marriage, I'd never seen Tom drunk, especially not in the middle of the day. Jenna stepped slightly in front of me, like she was trying to shield me. "We're just here to get some of her clothes and personal items," she said firmly. "We'll be quick." Tom laughed, a hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "Good luck with that. I've been doing some organizing." I didn't like the sound of that. I headed straight for the bedroom, trying to ignore the chaos around me. When I opened my closet, my heart sank. Empty. Completely empty, except for a few wire hangers swinging sadly. "Tom," I called out, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Where are my clothes?" "Donated them," he replied casually as he wandered into the bedroom doorway. "You know, to that women's shelter downtown. Figured if you didn't want to be my wife anymore, you didn't need the things I bought you." "You what?" I was dumbfounded. "Those were my clothes." "Were they though?" He took another sip of whiskey. "Because I paid for most of them. I checked the credit card statements. About 70% of your wardrobe was purchased with my card." I stood there, mouth open, trying to process what he was saying. Yes, Tom made more money than I did. And yes, we often used his credit card for shopping, but that was our arrangement. We were married, we shared expenses. Now he was acting like he'd been my personal shopper or something. "That's not how marriage works, Tom. We shared finances. Those clothes were mine regardless of which card was used." He shrugged. "Tell that to the judge. I've been talking to my lawyer too, you know." That's when I noticed the stack of financial documents on the bed. Bank statements, investment records, mortgage papers, all with post-it notes and highlighter marks. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing to the papers. "Just getting my affairs in order," he replied with a strange smile. "Did you know that my name is on basically everything we own? The house, both cars, the investment accounts, even that fancy fancy stand mixer you love so much was purchased with my Best Buy credit card. My blood ran cold. He was right. When we got married, it just made sense to put the big purchases in his name since his credit was better. The house was in both our names, but he'd made the down payment from his savings before we were married, which meant he owned a larger share. You can't just keep everything, Tom. That's not how divorce works. Maybe not everything, he conceded, but a lot more than you think, especially since I can prove I financially contributed more to this marriage. A lot more. Jenna, who had been silently watching this exchange, finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. She's entitled to her fair share. Tom turned his gaze to her, his eyes cold. Is she? We'll see what the court says. Oh, and you might want to check the guest room before you leave. He walked away, disappearing back into the living room. With a growing sense of dread, I headed to the guest room. There, piled haphazardly in the center of the floor, were some of my clothes, old t-shirts, worn jeans, things I'd had since before I met Tom. Basically, anything he couldn't claim he'd paid for. My nice dresses, my professional work clothes, my good winter coat all gone. I sank to my knees beside the pile, reality crashing down on me. Tom wasn't just upset about the divorce, he was preparing for war, and he'd already seized the high ground. He can't do this, Jenna kept saying as we stuffed what remained of my clothes into garbage bags. This has to be illegal. I don't know, I admitted. I never paid attention to whose name was on what. I trusted him. We grabbed what we could and left quickly. Tom didn't even look up as we passed through the living room. He was too busy sorting through more paperwork, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The next few days were a blur of panicked phone calls. I called my lawyer, who confirmed my worst fears. While I was entitled to an equitable distribution of marital assets, Tom's meticulous record-keeping could potentially work in his favor, especially if he could prove he contributed more financially. The clothes were a gray area, technically personal property, but hard to claim without receipts. He's building a case that you were essentially a dependent, my lawyer explained. It's manipulative and aggressive, but not entirely without legal merit. I hung up feeling sick. How could I have been so naive? All those years of joint finances, and I'd never once considered that Tom might be keeping score, mentally tallying up every purchase to use against me someday. 2 days later, I got a text from Tom that made my blood boil. Found your grandmother's recipe box. Let me know if it's important to you. That recipe box was one of my most treasured possessions. My grandmother had given it to me before she died, filled with handwritten family recipes going back generations. It wasn't valuable in any monetary sense, but it was irreplaceable to me, and Tom knew it. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I called my lawyer again, who advised me not to engage directly with Tom anymore. All communication should go through legal channels. She promised to send a formal request for the return of my personal sentimental items. But the next day, Tom upped the ante. I got an email with a spreadsheet attached, a detailed breakdown of our finances over the past 5 years, categorized and color-coded. For your reference, the email said. Thought you might want to know what you're walking away from. According to Tom's calculations, if we proceeded with the divorce and split assets according to contribution, I'd lose the house, both cars, and access to about 80% of our savings and investments. I'd be left with basically nothing except my personal items, what remained of them, and a pittance of cash. At the bottom of the email was a note. Of course, if you reconsider this hasty decision, we could just go back to sharing everything. Your choice. It was blackmail. Pure and simple. Stay in the marriage or leave with nothing. That night I cried until I had no tears left. Jenna tried to comfort me, but what could she say? This was so much worse than I'd anticipated. I'd wanted freedom, but it seemed like I might have to trade everything for it. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts from my sister, Emma. What the hell is wrong with you? The first one read. Tom just called me in tears. My heart sank as I scrolled through message after message. Apparently, Tom had called not just Emma but my parents and several of our mutual friends. He'd told them I was having some kind of breakdown, that I'd filed for divorce over jar lids, and was refusing his attempts at reconciliation. He claimed he was worried about my mental health and wanted their help to talk sense into me. I tried calling Emma to explain, but she wasn't having it. Jar lids? Jar lids? She kept repeating. Do you know how insane that sounds? It's not about the jars, I tried to explain. It's about control, about him deliberately making me dependent on him. He said you'd say something like that, Emma replied coldly. He told us you've been creating this whole narrative in your head, turning him into some kind of villain. I hung up, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Then my parents called, then 2 of my closest friends. All of them had heard Tom's version of events, and all of them thought I was being ridiculous. No one was listening to me. It sounds paranoid, my dad said gently. Sweetie, are you sure you're not just stressed from work? Maybe you need a vacation, not a divorce. By the end of the day, I felt completely isolated. Everyone thought I was overreacting at best, having a mental breakdown at worst. The only person who believed me was Jenna, and even she occasionally gave me looks that suggested she thought the jar lid thing was a bit extreme. That evening, I sat on Jenna's balcony, staring blankly at the sunset and wondering if I was making a massive mistake. Maybe I was blowing this whole thing out of proportion. Maybe Tom's jar tightening really was just an annoying habit, not a deliberate power play. Maybe. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jenna poked her head out. Someone's here to see you. To my surprise, it was Mike, my neighbor. He was holding a small cardboard box and looking concerned. I hope you don't mind me dropping by, he said after Jenna introduced us properly. Tom mentioned you were staying with a friend, and I got your address from the divorce papers taped to your front door. He what? I gasped. Mike grimaced. Yeah, not his classiest move. He taped them to the door with a note saying, in case anyone's looking for my unstable wife. I I took them down. Don't worry. I closed my eyes, mortified. Thanks for that. I also brought you these, Mike said, handing me the box. Inside were several jars, olives, pickles, pasta sauce, all with lids that twisted off easily. Thought you might need your own stash. The gesture was so unexpectedly kind that I felt tears welling up again. Mike seemed to sense my emotional state and quickly changed the subject, asking if he could help with anything else. Actually, I said, wiping my eyes, there is something. Tom has my grandmother's recipe box. It's really important to me, and he's basically holding it hostage. Mike nodded thoughtfully. I still have a spare key to your house from when I used to water your plants when you traveled. If you want, I could try to retrieve it. I hesitated. Legally, it was still my house too, so it wouldn't be breaking and entering. And the recipe box was undeniably mine. Would you? I'd go myself, but I'm afraid of facing Tom right now. Mike promised to try the next day when Tom typically went to the gym. As he was leaving, he turned back. For what it's worth, I believe you. About the jars, about all of it. Tom's behavior isn't normal. After he left, I felt a tiny spark of hope for the first time in days. Someone believed me. Someone understood. It wasn't much, but it was something. True to his word, Mike texted me the next afternoon with a photo of my grandmother's recipe box, safe in his kitchen. Mission accomplished. Tom was out, got in and out in 5 minutes. Noticed a few other things of yours he's been mistreating. Want me to go back for anything else? I was so relieved I almost started crying again. I asked if he could check for my photo albums and the small jewelry box that contained my mother's earrings. They weren't valuable, but they were sentimental. An hour later, Mike confirmed he'd rescued both items. The jewelry box was in the bathroom cabinet, shoved behind some cleaning supplies. The photo albums were in the garage, stacked near the recycling bin. The recycling bin. Tom had been planning to throw out my family photos. That night, I went to Mike's house to collect my rescued treasures. He invited me in for coffee, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I found myself relaxing a little as we talked. Mike was surprisingly easy to talk to. He was divorced himself, had been for about 8 years, and understood the emotional roller coaster I was on. He didn't judge or dismiss my feelings, just listened and offered practical advice. The financial stuff is tough, he admitted when I explained Tom's spreadsheet threats. But your lawyer's right, even if he contributed more, you're still entitled to a fair share. It might not be 50-50, but it won't be nothing. Over the next few days, Mike became my unexpected ally. He kept an eye on the house and updated me on Tom's activities. He retrieved more of my personal items during Tom's predictable absences. He even helped me document the condition of the house and my possessions, taking photos that might be useful for my lawyer. Meanwhile, Tom escalated his campaign. He'd started telling people I was having an affair, a complete fabrication, and suggested that was the real reason for the divorce. He froze our joint bank account, leaving me with just my personal account that had a few $100s in it. He canceled my credit card, which was on his account. He even contacted my workplace, telling my boss I was going through personal issues that might affect my performance. My family was still firmly on Team Tom. My sister refused to speak to me. My parents called daily, alternating between concern for my mental health and lectures about the sanctity of marriage. Friends started taking sides, and most chose Tom Charming, stable Tom who was just trying to save his marriage. 2 weeks into this nightmare, I hit rock bottom. My lawyer called with bad news. The temporary financial support I'd requested was denied by the judge, who wanted more evidence of financial need. Tom's car, which had been in his name and which I'd been using during our marriage, got repossessed while I was at work, leaving me stranded and humiliated. And Jenna, while still supportive, gently suggested it might be time for me to find other accommodations, as her boyfriend was moving in soon. I sat in my cubicle that afternoon, trying not to have a breakdown while searching rental listings I couldn't afford. Everything needed a security deposit, first and last month's rent, good credit, all things I didn't have access to anymore. I was facing homelessness, all because I dared to leave a controlling husband. When I got back to Jenna's that evening, via expensive Uber since my car was gone, there was a note from Mike taped to the door. "Call me when you get this," it said, with his number underneath. I called, and Mike answered immediately. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said without preamble. "I have a proposition for you." Mike owned a duplex he lived in one side and rented out the other. His tenant had moved out the previous month, and he hadn't gotten around to finding a new one yet. He offered to let me stay there, rent-free, until my divorce was settled. "I can't accept that," I protested. "It's too much. Consider it a loan then," he suggested. "You can pay me back when you get back on your feet, or help me renovate the place. It needs painting and some minor repairs." I was speechless, overwhelmed by his generosity. After some back and forth, I agreed to move in temporarily and help with the renovations as a form of rent. It wasn't charity that way. It was an exchange. The next day, Mike helped me move my meager possessions from Jenna's to the duplex. The space was small but clean, a one-bedroom unit with basic furniture and a tiny kitchen. It felt like a palace compared to Jenna's couch. "Make yourself at home," Mike said as he carried in the last box. "I'm next door if you need anything, but I'll respect your privacy." That first night in my new temporary home, I slept better than I had in weeks. The relief of having a safe place to stay was indescribable. Of course, Tom found out where I was living almost immediately. Apparently, our small town's gossip network was highly efficient. The texts started the very next day. "Shacking up with the neighbor already? Classy. Does Mike know you're crazy? Better warn him about your jar phobia. Hope you know this just proves what I'm telling everyone, you've been cheating all along." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I blocked his number and focused on rebuilding my life one small step at a time. Living next door to Mike turned out to be exactly what I needed. He was respectful of my space, but available when I needed help, or just someone to talk to. We fell into an easy routine: coffee together most mornings before work, occasional shared dinners, weekend renovation projects on the rental unit. I learned that Mike was a high school science teacher, divorced after his ex-wife cheated with his best friend. He understood betrayal and the painful process of starting over. He never pushed for details about my marriage, but listened when I needed to vent. As the weeks passed, I started feeling like myself again. I set up automatic transfers from my paycheck to a savings account, determined to build my financial independence. I thrifted new clothes to replace what Tom had donated. I even started cooking again, using recipes from my grandmother's box that Mike had rescued. The jar lids in Mike's house, I noticed, were always tightened just enough secure but easily opened. I never had to ask for help, never had to strain or struggle. It was such a small thing, but it meant everything to me. One Saturday, about a month after moving in, Mike and I were painting the living room of my unit. I was up on a ladder doing the trim when he said something that stopped me mid-brushstroke. "You know, I noticed Tom's jar thing years ago," he said casually. "Always thought it was weird how you'd struggle with them when he wasn't around." I nearly fell off the ladder. "You noticed? Why didn't you say anything?" Mike shrugged, focusing on rolling paint onto the wall. Not my place to interfere in someone else's marriage, but I wondered what? If it was just jars, or if there were other things, small ways he made you dependent on him. I climbed down from the ladder and sat on the drop cloth, suddenly needing to be at eye level for this conversation. There were lots of things. The jars were just the most obvious. Mike nodded, still painting. Controlling behavior usually starts small. Things that seem helpful at first, he's just being protective. He's taking care of things. He's watching out for you. Then one day you realize you can't make a move without him. The accuracy of his assessment stunned me. That's exactly how it happened. "How did you know?" "My sister went through something similar," he explained. Her husband would move her car keys, then help her find them. Made her think she was getting forgetful. By the time she left him, she thought she had early onset dementia. Turned out she was perfectly fine once he wasn't gaslighting her anymore. We painted in silence for a while after that, but something had shifted between us. Mike understood what I'd been through in a way no one else did. He saw the reality behind the jar lid story that everyone else dismissed. That evening, we ordered pizza and ate it on his back porch. The conversation flowed easily from books to movies to travel dreams. For the first time in ages, I felt comfortable, safe, and understood. When our hands accidentally touched the last slice, I felt a tiny spark of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I pushed the feeling away immediately. I was still technically married, still in the middle of a messy divorce. The last thing I needed was to develop feelings for someone new, especially the one person who was helping me get back on my feet. Besides, Mike had been nothing but kind and respectful. There was no indication he saw me as anything other than a friend in need. The divorce proceedings dragged on. Tom continued to fight me on every front, refusing to negotiate, demanding full possession of almost everything we'd owned together. My lawyer warned me it might take months, even a year, to resolve everything. "He's hoping you'll give up," she explained during one of our meetings. "Men like Tom can't accept losing control. He thinks if he makes this painful enough, you'll come crawling back." But I wasn't crawling anywhere. With each passing week, I grew stronger, more determined. I picked up extra shifts at work to build my savings. I completed a free online financial literacy course. I started therapy to process the emotional manipulation I'd endured for years. And always, Mike was there, not solving my problems for me, but offering support when I needed it. He drove me to lawyer appointments when I was still careless. He helped me research affordable vehicles when I was ready to buy one. He celebrated my small victories and listened to my frustrations. 2 months after moving into Mike's duplex, I bought a used Honda with cash, not much to look at, but completely mine. The title was in my name alone. No one could take it from me. The day I drove it home, Mike was waiting with a bottle of champagne. "To independence," he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. "To open my own damn jars," I replied, making him laugh. That night, sitting on my small porch watching fireflies blink in the yard we shared, I realized something important. I was happy. Not deliriously joyful, not problem-free, but genuinely content in a way I hadn't been for years. I had a safe place to live, a reliable car, a growing savings account, and a friend who respected me. Tom might take the house, the fancy kitchen appliances, even the furniture we'd picked out together. But he couldn't take this feeling of reclaiming my life, one small piece at a time. The next morning, I woke to a text from my sister, the first communication in weeks that wasn't an angry tirade. "Can we talk? In person?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Emma looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her cup lid as I sat down across from her. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "I saw Tom yesterday at the grocery store. He was with Karen from his office." Karen was Tom's administrative assistant, a pretty blonde about 10 years his junior. I'd always felt uncomfortable about how often Tom mentioned her, but had dismissed it as professional admiration. "They seemed close," Emma continued, "like really close. Holding hands, kissing in the cereal aisle close." I waited for the jealousy, the hurt, the anger to hit me, but all I felt was a strange sense of validation. "How long do you think it's been going on?" I asked calmly. Emma looked surprised by my reaction. "You're not upset?" "I'm past being upset about Tom," I said honestly. "I'm just wondering if this started before or after our split." Emma bit her lip. "Based on what I saw, I'd guess before. They looked way too comfortable together for this to be new." We talked for over an hour. I finally told Emma everything, not just about the jars, but about all the ways Tom had controlled and manipulated me, about the financial threats, the stolen possessions, the isolation tactics. For the first time, she really listened. "I'm so sorry," she said when I finished. "I should have trusted you. It's just that Tom was always so charming, so convincing." "That's how manipulators operate," I replied. "They make sure everyone thinks they're the good guy." By the time we parted, Emma had promised to talk to our parents, to help them understand what was really happening. One small piece of my support system was restored. When I told Mike about the Tom and Karen sighting that evening, he didn't seem surprised. "I've seen them together a few times," he admitted. "Wasn't sure if I should tell you." "Why didn't you?" He considered this. "Honestly, I didn't think it would help. You were already dealing with so much, and it seemed like adding one more betrayal to the pile." He was right, of course. Finding out about Karen earlier wouldn't have changed anything except maybe to add more pain to an already painful situation. The next week brought an unexpected development. My lawyer called with news. Tom wanted to settle. Apparently, the Karen situation had complications, namely, her husband finding out and threatening a workplace harassment suit. Tom's company was pressuring him to resolve his divorce quickly and quietly to avoid scandal. Suddenly, the man who'd been fighting me on every front was offering a reasonable division of assets. I would get 40% of our savings and investments, a fair cash settlement for my portion of the house equity, and all of my personal possessions returned. In exchange, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement about the circumstances of our divorce. Take it, my lawyer advised. It's a better deal than we'd likely get if we continued fighting. I signed the papers the next day. Just like that, after months of struggle, it was almost over. There would be a mandatory waiting period before the divorce was finalized, but the financial battle was done. That evening, I sat on my porch steps, feeling strangely empty. For so long, fighting Tom had been my focus, my purpose. Now that it was essentially over, I wasn't sure what came next. Mike found me there as dusk was falling. He sat down beside me, not saying anything, just offering his presence. Finally, I broke the silence. "It's over," I said. "We settled today. How do you feel?" he asked, his voice gentle. Relieved, sad, confused, hopeful. I laughed a little. "All of the above, I guess." Mike nodded. "That sounds about right." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. Then Mike stood up, offering me his hand. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." He led me to his kitchen, where an array of jars was set out on the counter: pickles, olives, pasta sauce, jam, all the staples. "What's this?" I asked, confused. Mike handed me a jar of pickles. "Open it." I twisted the lid, and it came off easily. He handed me another jar and another. Each one opened with minimal effort. No struggling, no straining, no humiliation. "I went shopping," Mike explained. "Wanted to make sure you always had jars you could open in this house." It was such a simple thing, but it made me tear up. Here was a man who understood that it had never really been about the jars. It was about respect, about agency, about being heard. And instead of dismissing my feelings or telling me I was overreacting, he'd done something tangible to show he got it. In that moment, standing in Mike's kitchen surrounded by easily opened jars, I finally admitted to myself what I'd been fighting for weeks. I had feelings for him, strong feelings, but it was too soon, too complicated. I was still technically married, still recovering from years of manipulation, still finding my footing as an independent person. "Thank you," I said simply, hoping my voice didn't betray the emotional turmoil inside me. "This means a lot." Mike smiled, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something in his eyes that mirrored my own confusing feelings. But he just nodded and started putting the jars away. "By the way," he said casually, "I've been thinking, since you've been such a big help with the renovations, and the place is looking great now, would you be interested in staying? As a proper tenant, I mean. Fair market rent once your divorce settlement comes through, but no rush until then." It was the perfect solution. I could maintain my independence while staying in the place that had become my sanctuary, and I could keep Mike in my life, whatever that might mean for the future. "I'd like that," I replied. "Very much." 2 days later, a large box arrived on my doorstep. Inside was every possession Tom had claimed he'd donated or thrown away: my clothes, my books, even the fancy stand mixer I loved. There was no note, no explanation. I guessed Karen had found out about his petty revenge tactics and forced him to return my things. I carried the box inside, feeling strange about having these items back. They represented my old life, my married self. I wasn't sure they fit who I was becoming. After some thought, I decided to keep only what truly mattered to me and donate the rest. I was building a new life now, making my own choices, and those choices included letting go of the past jar lids and all. I spent that night sorting through the box of my old possessions, deciding what to keep and what to donate. It felt weirdly therapeutic, like I was literally sorting through pieces of my past life. I kept the stand mixer because honestly, that thing was expensive and made amazing cookies. Some of my favorite sweaters and dresses made the cut too, but most of it went into garbage bags for donation. The next morning, Mike knocked on my door with coffee, something that had become our little routine. "What's with all the bags?" he asked, nodding toward the pile by my door. "Tom returned my stuff. I'm keeping some, donating the rest." I took a sip of coffee. "Thanks for this, by the way." "No problem. Need help dropping that stuff off?" I nodded, grateful for his offer. We loaded everything into his truck and drove to the local women's shelter. The irony wasn't lost on me that these clothes were coming back to the same place Tom claimed he'd donated them to in the first place. When we got back, Mike mentioned he was working on fixing the bathroom sink in his unit and asked if I'd mind taking a look at mine too while he had his tools out. "Sure, it's been dripping anyway," I said. I followed him into my bathroom and watched as he checked under the sink. "Just needs a new washer. Easy fix," he said, reaching for his toolbox. As he worked, I leaned against the doorframe, thinking about how different this felt from when Tom used to fix things around our house. With Tom, home repairs were always a production. He'd make a big show of his handyman skills, explaining every step like I was a child, then expect endless praise for changing a light bulb. Mike just quietly fixed things without the performance. "All set," Mike said, tightening the last connection. He tested the faucet, no more dripping. "Thanks," I said. "What do I owe you for plumbing services?" "Dinner?" he suggested with a small smile. I was thinking of trying that new Thai place. My stomach did a little flip. Was this a date, or just two friends having dinner? I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to make things awkward by asking. "Thai sounds great," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. Later that evening, we sat across from each other at the restaurant, menus in hand. I couldn't help noticing how different this felt from dinners with Tom. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, just easy conversation and genuinely enjoying each other's company. Our food arrived, and Mike scooped some of his curry onto my plate without asking. "Thought you might want to try this. It's amazing." Such a small gesture, but it hit me hard. Tom would have never shared his food. He'd order precisely what he wanted and eat every bite, even if I expressed interest in trying it. Another tiny control thing I'd never recognized until now. After dinner, we walked back to his truck. The night was warm, stars bright above us. Our hands brushed accidentally, and I felt that same spark from before. "This was nice," I said as we reached the truck. "Thanks for suggesting it." "It was," Mike agreed. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead just opened my door for me. Back at the duplex, we lingered in the shared front yard, neither of us seeming ready to end the evening. Finally, Mike cleared his throat. throat. Listen, I've been wanting to say something, but I'm not sure if it's the right time. My heart sped up. What is it? I like you, he said simply. Not just as a friend or a tenant, but I understand if you're not ready for anything more than friendship. You've been through a lot. I took a deep breath. I like you too. And you're right. The timing is complicated. I'm still technically married for another few weeks. Mike nodded. No pressure. Just wanted you to know where I stand. Can we take it slow? I asked. See where things go once my divorce is final? Of course, he said with a warm smile. Slow is good. He reached out and squeezed my hand briefly, then headed toward his side of the duplex. Good night, I replied, feeling both nervous and excited about this new possibility. The next few weeks passed in a kind of pleasant limbo. Mike and I continued our coffee mornings and occasional shared meals. We worked on house projects together. We talked about everything and nothing, but there was a new undercurrent to our interactions, lingering looks, brief touches, a mutual awareness that we were waiting for something to change. Meanwhile, my divorce proceeded smoothly after the settlement. Tom seemed to have lost interest in tormenting me now that he had Karen. My lawyer called with updates, each one bringing me closer to official freedom. One Saturday, I was painting my bedroom, the last room in my unit that needed updating, when there was a knock at the door. I set down my roller and went to answer it, surprised to find my parents standing on the porch. Mom? Dad? What are you doing here? I hadn't seen them since before filing for divorce. Our phone conversations had been strained at best. Emma told us everything, my mom said. About Tom, about what he did. We came to apologize. I stood frozen for a moment, then stepped back to let them in. They looked around my small rental, taking in the fresh paint and simple furnishings. It's nice, my dad said. Cozy. We sat in my living room, the conversation awkward at first. They admitted they should have believed me from the start. They'd been so focused on preserving my marriage that they hadn't considered it might not be worth saving. We just thought jar lids seemed so trivial, my mom explained. It was never just about jar lids, I said for what felt like the 100th time. It was about control. My dad nodded, looking genuinely regretful. We understand that now, especially after finding out about his involvement with that woman from his office. We talked for over an hour. They asked about my plans, my job, my future. I told them about the settlement, about establishing my independence. I didn't mention my growing feelings for Mike that seemed like a conversation for another day. As they were leaving, my mom hugged me tightly. We're proud of you, she whispered. You're stronger than we gave you credit for. After they left, I sat on my porch steps, feeling lighter. Another broken piece of my life repaired. I looked up to see Mike coming around the side of the house with his lawnmower. Was that your parents? He called over the sound of the engine. I nodded. They came to apologize. Good, he said firmly. They should. Later that evening, my phone pinged with a text from my lawyer. Judge signed off on final divorce decree today. You are officially a free woman. Congratulations. I stared at the message, a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Relief, definitely. Sadness for what could have been, but mostly an overwhelming sense of possibility. My future was entirely my own now. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and ran next door to Mike's. I knocked rapidly, almost bouncing with nervous energy. He opened the door, looking concerned. Everything okay? My divorce is final, I blurted out. It's done. Official. His expression softened into a smile. That's great news. How do you feel? Free, I said honestly, and a little scared, and hopeful. We stood looking at each other for a long moment, then Mike stepped back. Want to come in? I just opened a bottle of wine. We could celebrate your newfound freedom. I followed him into his kitchen, where he poured 2 glasses of red wine. To new beginnings, he toasted. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. We moved to his living room, sitting closer on the couch than we normally would. The conversation flowed easily, but there was a new tension in the air, an awareness of the barrier that had fallen. So, Mike said finally, setting down his wine glass, we agreed to take things slow until your divorce was final. I nodded, my heart beating faster. And now it's final. So where does that leave us? He asked, his voice soft. I'm not sure, I admitted. I know I have feelings for you, strong ones, but I'm still figuring out who I am on my own. Mike reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. I understand that, and I'm not going anywhere. We can figure it out together, at whatever pace feels right. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at his face. Before I could overthink it, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as he pulled me closer. When we broke apart, I felt dizzy in the best possible way. That was long overdue, Mike finished, smiling. We spent the rest of the evening talking and occasionally kissing, setting no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company. It felt right in a way nothing had for a very long time. 3 days later, I got another unexpected visitor. I opened my door to find Tom standing there, looking uncomfortable. What do you want? I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I came to return this, he said, holding out a small box. Found it when I was packing up some stuff. I took the box cautiously and opened it. Inside was my grandmother's wedding ring, which I'd thought was lost years ago. Thanks, I said stiffly. Tom shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I also wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything. The way I handled the divorce, the things I did with your stuff, it was childish. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation I'd become so accustomed to, but he seemed genuinely remorseful. Why the change of heart? I asked. He sighed. Therapy, believe it or not. Karen insisted after she found out about some of the things I did, the jar thing especially. I raised an eyebrow. She made you get therapy over jar lids? When I explained it to my therapist, he said it was a control tactic, Tom admitted. I didn't see it that way at the time, but looking back, yeah, it was messed up. I'm working on it. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. Another part appreciated the apology, however late it came. I hope it helps, I said finally. The therapy. Tom nodded. Me too. He looked past me into the apartment. Place looks good. You seem happy. I am, I replied simply. After Tom left, I sat looking at my grandmother's ring. It felt like the final piece returning to me. The last thing Tom had held over me now back where it belonged. That weekend, Mike and I went on our first official date dinner at a nice restaurant, followed by a walk along the river downtown. It felt both new and familiar, exciting and comfortable at the same time. I have a confession to make, Mike said as we walked hand in hand. That first day when I helped you with the salsa jar, I noticed right away something was off. It was sealed way tighter than any normal jar should be. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. What would I have said? Hey, I think your husband is deliberately making jars too tight for you to open. It sounds crazy from the outside. I laughed. Yeah, I found that out the hard way. He squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I never thought you were overreacting. Not even when you first explained about the divorce. Some things look small from the outside but feel enormous when you're living with them. Thank you for that, I said softly, for believing me when no one else did. 6 months later, I was completely settled into my new life. My rental agreement with Mike had evolved into us spending most nights together, though we still maintained separate spaces. My career was going well. I'd even gotten a promotion. My relationship with my family had healed, and they had fully accepted Mike into the fold. On the anniversary of my divorce being finalized, Mike surprised me with a picnic in the park where we'd had our second date. As we sat on the blanket, enjoying the sunshine and good food, he handed me a small wrapped package. What's this? I asked. Just a little something to mark the occasion, he replied, looking slightly nervous. I unwrapped it to find a jar of my favorite fancy jam, the kind I only bought as a special treat. The lid was already loosened, just enough that I could open it easily. Look inside, Mike suggested. I opened the jar to find a small velvet box nestled on top of the jam. My breath caught as I lifted it out. This isn't a proposal, Mike said quickly. Not yet. I know you're still finding your footing. I opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small moonstone. It's a promise, he continued, that I'll always respect your independence, that I'll never try to control you or make you feel small, that all the jars in our house will always be tightened just right, secure enough to keep things fresh, but never so tight you can't open them yourself. Tears welled in my eyes as I slipped the ring onto my right hand. It's perfect, like you, he said, kissing me softly. Later that night, as we prepared dinner together in his kitchen, I watched Mike carefully close a jar of olives, tightening it just enough, then giving it a small quarter turn back to loosen it slightly. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. People still sometimes laugh when they hear the jar lid divorce story. My sister Emma likes to tell it at parties, though she now presents it as a cautionary tale about recognizing controlling behavior. She always ends with, and now she's with a guy who practically pre-loosens jars for her. I don't mind the jokes anymore. They've lost their power to hurt me, because in the end, it really wasn't about the jars. It was about being heard, being respected, being valued. And every day with Mike reminds me that I made the right choice not just in leaving Tom, but in believing I deserved better. Sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest truths about our relationships. For me, it was jar lids. For someone else, it might be something entirely different, but the lesson is the same. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. I'm glad I finally did.